Hello, my name is Michelle and welcome to my channel, Michelle's Melancholia. Today I will be reviewing this vintage horror book called The Embryo, written by Andrew Laurence, and it is from the year 1980. I think so. For some background, I purchased this book from an Etsy shop that sadly I don't think it exists anymore. It was called Foxfang Horror or Foxfang Horror Books, and it was really good. Sadly, I think it's now closed down, but that's where I found this book. And the reason I chose this one from the ones they had available is because I thought the synopsis in the back sounded very interesting, so I will read that to you. Turning fear into reality. For some, it is being burnt alive in a nuclear holocaust, or drowning in slowly rising black water. For others, it is being crushed beneath the wheels of a runaway lorry, or bleeding to death under the surgeon's knife. Because whatever you dread most, this creature, not yet born, can make it happen. The embryo. Product of a forbidden union, what powers will its birth unleash? What destiny was it created to achieve? The embryo. Yes, it just basically says the embryo twice. So this description was very appealing to me. Unfortunately, this is not really what you get into this book, but I'll just walk you through the whole thing. When I added it to my Goodreads, the first thing I noticed is that the only version available there was with a different cover, and it only had 8 reviews. Now it has 9 because one of them is mine. So I was quite intrigued about this book because there really didn't seem to be a lot of information about it. I just put it on the search engine and I could barely find anything. The only information I could find came from the blog Too Much Horror Fiction by Will Erickson, which as some of you may know, he was involved with the creation of the Paperbacks from Hell book with Grady Hendrix. And his blog is an amazing catalog of vintage horror. And I managed to find some information there. And I discovered that this book is the third in a trilogy called something like the Nostradamus trilogy. And even though it's a trilogy, they are standalone, they can be read on their own. And that was my experience with these. I didn't need any background information to understand the story. And I also found that the reason the book titled The Embryo is not very common is that they were later published under different names. So The Embryo later on became The Unborn. And the other 2 books in the trilogy are called The Premonition and The Link. The trilogy, by the way, is called Blood of Nostradamus, and I will link that blog post below in case you are curious and want to read about the whole trilogy. But anyways, this book was a bit disappointing, unfortunately, and it would be really hard for me to explain to you why I did not enjoy this book very much without spoilers. So this is going to be quite spoilery. If you think you're going to read this book and you don't want to know anything about it, feel free to just click out. But otherwise, you can really take it as me having read this, so you don't have to. So I will explain to you what happens in this book. So the story really is about a young woman called Selena, which one day receives an unusual letter that reads, "Dear Selena, in the next 24 hours you will experience a psychic phenomenon which you may find extremely unpleasant. It will in no way endanger your life, nor cause you any physical or mental harm, but it will frighten you. I beg you to speak to no one of this warning, nor seek help. Why you are being subjected to this manifestation will be explained to you in due course. Be calm, be wise, be patient, and trust me, a well-wisher and friend who will contact you." So one night, Selena is sleeping in her bed when someone joins her, and she thinks this is a young man who was spending the night in her flat, so they have sex. But then Selena discovers that this is no man, that this is a weird supernatural creature, and she's completely freaked out. So the following day she takes the train, and while she's on the train, this a woman approaches her and sits in front of her, and she says, "Hi Selena, my name is Melanie," and basically Melanie tells her that she was the being who came into her bed and slept with her. So Selena is super confused, and Melanie ends up explaining that Selena has psychic powers and that she is a descendant of Nostradamus. And she also tells her that, well, she's also psychic, so she tells Selena that they can potentiate each other's psychic powers by sleeping together and giving each other orgasms. And this just happens at the beginning of the book, and it was already a bit uncomfortable because it definitely was written in a way that it was kind of fetishizing two women sleeping together. And just in general, the conversations these two women were having, I wonder if this guy ever talked to a woman before, because they were obsessed with being seductive and attractive, and yeah, it was just very strange. What happens later is that Melanie explains that she's pregnant to begin with, and then she tells Selena that she has two other kids which are about, I think, like 11 and 13 or something like that, and this will be important later. And her children have been kidnapped by a company that is researching their paranormal or like their psychic powers. And obviously there's a whole storyline where the Americans and the Russians are fighting over control of these kids because they want to like weaponize them or whatever. And I feel like, well, I don't know for sure because I wasn't around there, but let me know. I have a feeling that in the 80s, there was a lot of talk about governments researching paranormal phenomena to use as weapons, I believe. So yeah, that was very prominent in this book. So Melanie basically asks Selena to infiltrate this company and help her rescue her children. And the whole book is about this storyline and Selena going to different places and trying to find these children. And there is basically no story about the embryo until the later parts of the book. And to be honest, while I was reading this more kind of like adventure plot, I kept thinking that this was not so bad, and I even thought about continuing with the trilogy because there was like a lot of like intrigue and plotting and trying to be like sneaky, and it was quite entertaining. And then things started to go downhill once Selena finds the children. What happens is that Selena escapes with the children and they reunite with Melanie, who has given birth to her baby, which we believe is this evil embryo because of a Nostradamus prophecy that says that a baby will be born and the baby will be evil. However, we come to find out that this embryo is not the evil embryo. Of course, it wouldn't be the evil embryo. I mean, its name is Mickey. I feel like an evil embryo would not be called Mickey. We find out that the real evil embryo is inside the little girl who is like 12 or something like that. And the worst part is how the embryo ends up inside that little girl. Because if you remember, in the back it says product of a forbidden union, and it is quite forbidden because the father of that little embryo is the other little boy who is also like 13 or 14, and it is described in the book that that baby was created in the traditional way that I don't even want to say out loud. And yeah, that made me kind of uncomfortable because I don't want to read about children engaging in these type of activities that are not appropriate for their age. But it gets kind of worse because then Selena, who is an adult woman herself, also gets involved in these kinds of activities with these two children. And not only that, but we get descriptions of what Selena, the adult woman, was thinking while all of this was happening and how much she liked it. And she is describing these children's bodies in ways that I don't want to read about, and I don't know why anyone would want to write about it except for maybe just like shock value, I suppose. And then the author, well, the narrator or whatever, tries to justify it by saying, oh, these two little kids, they're not normal kids, they're actually like these psychic kids who in reality their brains are like those of like adults. But I was like, I don't care. I honestly don't care. I don't want to read about this. And I suppose when reading this kind of older books, one as a reader can decide on their own balance of being uncomfortable with the content and how much entertainment or value they are gaining from the story. And I mean, this type of content is really pushing the limit to what I am willing to read. This particular topic, I just don't want to read about it. But I guess maybe I would have given it a bit of a pass if this story was amazing, if it had really good writing, or say the story was like extremely riveting or original or something. But it was really nothing special. It was very, very predictable because we are given Nostradamus's prophecies, and I guess the point of the book is that throughout the story you come to realize how these prophecies come true. But for me, as soon as I read them, I was like, oh, I already know what's going to happen. And yes, indeed, that's exactly what ends up happening. So I was not in any way surprised or I don't think there was anything mind-blowing about the story that would justify what I had to sit through reading those parts. So in conclusion, the reason I wanted to talk about this book in its own video is because I thought first that it was interesting that I couldn't find much information about it online. So I thought maybe some of you who are very big vintage horror fans would find it interesting. I hope you did. And I guess just it was an interesting point of discussion for me to talk about what my limits are when reading shocking content. And I guess just to summarize the story for you, in case you, as I was, are curious because of the quite appealing description of the book, but now you don't have to read it if you don't want to. So yeah, I wish I could unread some of the things I read here, but I hope you enjoyed the video and hopefully my next review will be a better one. But until then, goodbye.